May 10th, 2021 City Council meeting. Thank you for joining us in this remote meeting format we're using in response to Governor Brown's Stay Home, Save Lives order. This format enables the City Council to meet, hear from the community, and take care of business while keeping everyone safe. Anyone wishing to access the meeting can do so by watching the live stream available on our website, the broadcast on Comcast Channel 21, or by following the access instructions for this meeting on the public webcast and meeting materials web page. We have a full agenda tonight, which includes a public forum. If you wish to participate during the public forum portion of the meeting and haven't already done so, please raise your virtual hand now to join the speakers queue in one of two ways. For those viewing the meeting on a computer, laptop, or other device, click once on the hand icon. For those listening to the meeting on a phone, press *9. We will continue accepting raised hands until 7:35. The meeting moderator will unraise or disallow any requests to speak that are made after that deadline. You will have 2.5 minutes to speak. As a reminder, we are now allowing speakers the option of turning on your video when you are called on to provide testimony. As each speaker's turn is announced, the meeting moderator will temporarily promote you to panelist status, and you can unmute and turn on your video if you wish. Please be aware that this transition takes a little bit longer so be patient. And also, I encourage all of you to use this increased access in a responsible way. Our intent simply is to be able to see each other's faces as testimony is given. Any misuse of the platform or violation of the council's code of conduct will result in immediate termination of your speaking privilege. Thank you all for joining us. And as always, feel free to contact any one of us individually or together via email or voicemail if there is testimony that you are not able to provide or wish to get to us in a different manner. And then in our new protocols for this meeting, I will begin the meeting formally with a land acknowledgement. Since time immemorial, the Kalapuya people have been the indigenous stewards to our region, building dynamic communities, maintaining balance with wildlife, and enacting sustainable land practices. Following treaties between 1851 and 1855, Kalapuya people were dispossessed of their indigenous homeland by the United States government and forcibly removed to the Coast Reservation in Western Oregon. The city of Eugene is built within the traditional homelands known as the Kalapuya Ilahi. Kalapuya descendants are citizens of the Confederated Tribes of Grand Ronde Community of Oregon and the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz Indians of Oregon, and continue to make contributions in our communities here and across the lands. We, the City of Eugene government, acknowledge the inherent political sovereignty of the 9 federally recognized tribal nations in the state of Oregon and all American Indian, Alaska Native people who live here. Our first item of business are committee reports and items of interest. And I am going to use my role to just make some brief introductory remarks before I turn this over to counselors to speak to any issues that they wish. And I wish to speak specifically to the 3 counselors who were awoke this morning to find their property had been extensively defaced with large anti-police, defund the police graffiti. City councilors have been targeted in a misdirected effort to intimidate and pressure them to pursue a specific goal of defunding the police. The city council has embarked on a challenging and courageous path to explore ways to improve not only our response to the public safety needs of this community, but to the well-being of everyone who lives here, particularly BIPOC and LGBTQ communities and people struggling with homelessness. To the people who sprayed graffiti, your anonymous actions are cowardly and counterproductive. You are only hurting yourselves. The rest of this community wishes to engage in a respectful and promising path forward with civil discourse on these most important issues. And with that, I will turn to any counselors who wish to speak. Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to be the first to support what you just said. I think it's wrong thinking to do such damage to somebody's property like that, and it's going to have a counter effect. It certainly doesn't make me feel more favorable towards what you said in the graffiti and support that position. It's important that members of our community be able to engage in meaningful dialogue and be able to state their positions without fear of reprisal. And this cuts at the very basis of our democracy when we have people with intent to intimidate, with intent to bully others, especially your elected officials who are here trying to do our best to operate our city and provide for all of our residents and people that pass through. So thank you, Mayor. And again, I appreciate your words and I support them wholeheartedly.
Any other counselors wishing to share an item? Councilor Clark.
I just want to say I agree with everything you said, Mayor, and I agree with everything that Councilor Groves just said. And my home was not tagged the way some of my colleagues were, and it was awful. And it's a crime, and it's bullying, and it doesn't serve any purpose. I just want to make the connection that there are an awful lot of people in our community who've been experiencing that over the last year in their businesses and in their homes. And it's equally a problem for them. And while I understand, and it didn't happen to me, so it's easy for me to say. But I have just as big a problem with the graffiti of similar nature that happens at someone's business downtown or out on, West 11th or out on 7th or wherever it takes place. And I will hope that our council takes it, is willing to be more pronounced in our response to this in other areas of our community as well. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Zelenka.
Yeah, thank you, Mayor. I support wholeheartedly what you just said. Seems to be some kind of confusion with what is the most effective way to communicate with counselors. A few years back, I was on a panel at the Public Interest Environmental Law Conference about effective communication with elected officials, and I described my personal hierarchy of effectiveness. Others may have a different hierarchy, and can disagree, but if you imagine a scale from the room you're in, from the ceiling to the floor, at the top of the ceiling, the top most effective way to communicate is a one-on-one direct face-to-face communication. That's the most effective. Then kind of dropping down to about head height is a one-on-one or a small group Teams or Zoom call or a small group phone call. And then kind of dropping down to countertop level, handwritten or a printed letter that's sincere, it would be next. And then kind of right below that is text, and then kind of on the floor is emails, because we just get too many emails. It's not a very effective way. And then mass exactly the same postcards and emails, they're in the basement. And then having 10 to 20 people say the exact same thing over and over again, same message during a forum, also down there in the basement. But way deep underground is trespassing and leaving behind signs and graffiti and tagging houses. This last one in particular, to some extent, the second to last one, is most likely to be counterproductive and be anti-effective in messaging. Badgering and trying to intimidate is not an effective way to communicate. It doesn't work. Bullying doesn't work. In fact, it's likely to backfire on people. So just I was just a little shocked at what some people thought was an okay way to go about communicating with council.
Thank you. Councillor Keating.
Thanks, Mayor. I added my voice to support of your strong condemnation for what three of our colleagues woke up to this morning. I welcome dialogue and debate. You may not agree with a word of what I say, paraphrasing Voltaire, but defend to the death my right to say it. This is the forum, or the paper, or the internet, or the streets, or the steps of the federal courthouse. March, write, call. But when an elected official or your political opponent, one who you may not agree with, when their home or work are invaded, it is unconscionable, it is uncalled for, it is uncouth, and it is wholly inappropriate and illegal. And I stand with you, Mayor, in strong condemnation of such behavior.
Thank you all for your words. I appreciate that, and I value your service. And so thank you for being here tonight. I have shifting mood a little bit. I have two kind of ceremonial matters today. One is that is a recognition of Arbor Day. And I will just describe this very briefly. Arbor Day actually originated in 1872 in Nebraska, where the Nebraska Board of Agriculture set aside a day for the planting of trees. And Arbor Day is a recognition of that day. And I have been asked to read a proclamation, and I am not going to read the whole proclamation, but I will read the very end. Now, therefore, I, Lucy Venice, Mayor of City of Eugene, following the example set by Governor Brown for the state of Oregon, do hereby proclaim April 2021 to be Arbor Month. And I urge all citizens to participate and care for our city's urban forest. Further, I urge all citizens to plant trees to gladden the heart and promote the well-being of this and future generations. And my second, catching up, that was April, and my next proclamation, my next statement, relates to May. And May is Bike Month, and it has been celebrated around the country since the 1950s, and here in Eugene for the past 8 years. The month is full of bike-related activities for all ages. There will be a few physically distanced, COVID-safe group rides this year, and there are also plenty of online and self-directed events as well. I encourage everyone to try out biking somewhere this month if you haven't done it in a while, as biking will help us meet our climate goals and it can make us a healthier community. And you can find the list of events at webbikelane.org. So thank you all for bearing with me through those little ceremonial announcements. And with that, I'm assuming we are finished with items. And we can go on to the consent calendar. So I'll turn to Councilor Ye.
Thanks, Mayor. So I move to approve the items on consent calendar 1.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you very much. That passes. And with that, we're ready to proceed to the public forum. The public forum is an opportunity for individuals to speak to the City Council on any city-related issues except for those items which have already been heard by a hearings official. When it is your turn, the moderator will announce your name and promote you to panelist status. Please state your name clearly, and for Eugene residents, your ward if known, before beginning your comments. Again, each person will have 2.5 minutes to speak. If you are watching the meeting, the timer should be visible. A yellow light will come on when you have 15 seconds to complete your comments. The red light indicates the end of your 2.5 minutes. When your time has concluded, the moderator will demote you back to attendee status and move on to the next speaker. For those who have connected to the meeting via phone and don't have the benefit of seeing the timer, Please be aware that your microphone will be muted at the 2.5-minute mark. And with that, I will turn it over to our moderator to begin the public forum.
Thank you, Mayor. We have 15 speakers tonight for the public forum. Our first speaker is Meg O'Ryan, and our next will be T. Lipton. Meg, can you unmute?
Yes. Am I good?
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. My name is Meg O'Ryan. I live in downtown Eugene. And I wanted to comment on the military jet that flew over downtown 2 Saturdays ago. My first, it felt problematic in a few different ways, but one of the bigger ones for me was that it flew over Washington Jefferson Bridge, which is currently home to hundreds of our unhoused community members, many of whom are vets and many of whom are experiencing mental health issues. The loud jet, I imagine, is a PTSD trigger for many. I have a handful of anecdotes that I've collected while talking to people about this in the last couple of weeks. And while I realize the anecdotes are not scientific proof, they are the voices of our community. One man dropped to his knees at the farmer's market and sobbed for 15 minutes. He was a veteran, sorry, a little emotional. Luckily, someone was there to comfort him. Another mom of 2 children, one of her children thought it was 9/11, the other thought it was an earthquake. All 3 were traumatized. I was at home, and my first thought after a year like we've had was, what now? Are we going to war? And I thought I should grab my children and run. A nurse who works night shift was disturbed and couldn't get back to sleep. My concern is that I don't think it aligns with city values. I wonder the environmental impact, I wonder the cost. And while I realize that there was probably a large amount of people who love the celebration of a jet flying over our city to celebrate the first football game, I think there might be another way that takes care of all of our community members and doesn't cause PTSD triggers and children to think that 9/11 is happening and people to think we're going to war. Something that doesn't harm the environment, something that doesn't cost thousands of dollars that we could be putting into something else. I wonder if there could be a parade. I don't know. I'm not a huge football fan, but I know other people are, and I'm sure there could be some brainstorming, and perhaps this year could be the last year that there is a military jet that flies over the city without warning or without apologies to the people that it harmed. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be T. Lipton. And after that, it will be Nate.
Hi, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, my name is T. Lipton. I live in Ward 1, and I've never spoken at a city council meeting before. I came here to say that I recently started doing, and probably in the last 5 or 6 months, street level mutual aid work in our community with our houseless population. And I wanted to share with the council what happened to me last night. I spent the last 3 hours of my Mother's Day with a 75-year-old houseless woman at the 7th and Jefferson 7-Eleven who had been discharged from the hospital with no safe place to sleep. It was obvious that she had edema in her legs and early onset either Alzheimer's or dementia. And after 3 unsuccessful hours and 2 visits by Cahoots, we were unable to find her a place to sleep that night, and I had to leave her at 11 p.m. after exhausting every resource on the curb at 7-Eleven. I'm here because that touched me very deeply. This is not the only instance of things like this I have seen, and I really want to urge the council to reallocate the payroll tax, the Community Safety Initiative money, to homeless services. We need affordable housing. We need no barriers housing for these members of our community who are falling through the cracks. I was in long pants and a t-shirt last night, and I was cold standing out there with her waiting. So I can imagine what it was like for her having to sit out on the curb all night long. It is heartbreaking and it is unacceptable that we as a city are not doing more to protect our community members, especially our elderly. There's nowhere for them to go. I also work with a woman at the 13th and Chambers Hospice Camp who is suffering multiple seizures, who is disabled, who is camping in a tent with no power to run her CPAP machine, causing her to have seizures on almost a daily basis, being harassed by the mentally ill who are also going untreated in our community and are on our streets. I just felt the need to come and speak tonight and share these experiences with you and urge you to do whatever it takes to build no barrier housing for these people. In other cities where they have done this, they've had high success rates of people within 2 years taking steps to better their lives on their own. And I believe that that could be something that could happen in Eugene. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker will be Nate, followed by Jacob.
Hello, and thank you for hearing me tonight. Like our previous speaker, I'm a mutual aid supporter in this city. I deliver mutual aid to our unhoused neighbors as often as I can and pretty regularly. And I also just wanted to echo previous speakers' call that we need more money, especially from our CSI budget, moving into cahoots and housing solutions for our unhoused neighbors. 0 to 30,000 a year. If you make that much money, there's pretty limited options for renting in the city, for owning in the city, for camping in the city. We don't have campgrounds. The city could be leasing campgrounds from the Forest Service. The city could build some campgrounds. You know, it's a pretty easy thing to do, temporary campground. Having worked with the Forest Service in my youth, it's pretty simple to throw together a campground, you know, bring in some porta potties. I don't know why we can't manage to do that as a city. It seems like it's not that hard of a reach to make. Also want to put a shout out for Cahoots to get actual a raise, because I've thought about working at Cahoots and it's been kind of a thing I think about a lot. I'm like, hey, you know, that's a pretty good job, but then I look at how much they get paid, and you know, $18 an hour, I couldn't pay my rent, couldn't pay a mortgage on that. You know, it's not really a living wage. I mean, it is a living wage in our city, but not really. It's pretty hard to get by when you have a job that induces PTSD in a lot of people and is a really difficult job and is $10 under the national average for similar jobs. We're supposed to be setting a standard as a state that says Cahoots is like a big thing here. You know, we're doing great with Cahoots. Unfortunately, we're not paying them enough money to do their job. So if we could pay them $28 to $48 an hour, you know, that would be a much better start. Thank you so much for hearing me out on that. Last thing I want to say, getting a little emotional about that one, is I don't want to see the steam plant privatized. I don't want to see us negotiating to give away 3 acres of publicly owned prime real estate along the riverfront and subsidies to go to exclusive luxury neighborhood housing and bringing in new people. That's great, we can bring in new people, but we should also house our Eugenians who need housing now. Thank you for your time, and that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Nate. Our next speaker is Jacob, followed by Rob.
Hello there. My name is Jacob True. I'm from Ward 1. I'm a little bit flustered following those 2 very heartfelt testimonies. Yeah, just thinking about all the folks that are unhoused and all the, you know, wasted capacity that we have around here is breaking my heart. We have the funds to do it. The Community Safety Initiative is bringing in all this funding from the payroll tax y'all enacted. So it should really be going to helping those that need it the most in the community, you know, helping with unhoused folks and not to more police to evict them, shove them around so they go other places, cause more trauma. We don't need that. You know, as it is, so much of the money that we're spending on police services is inefficient and ineffective. We need to try a better system, something where we're addressing the problems that cause homelessness instead of you know, spending, you know, a huge portion of the Eugene City's budget on moving people around. It's not effective, it's not efficient. Please reallocate the CSI funds away from policing, inefficient policing, to addressing the causes of homelessness and, you know, Let's be a humane city. Thank you.
Thank you, Jacob. Our next speaker is Rob, followed by phone number ending in 327.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great, thanks. Thank you everyone for just letting me speak tonight. I just have some short comments I want to make. I just wanted to take some time to respond to some of the comments that I heard from counselors in response to the information presented on the CSI engagement sessions and the work session a little earlier this evening. First, Councillor Clark mentioned that he would have preferred that the survey and the feedback from the community were focused more on the outcomes that community members would prefer rather than the methods that they prefer to be used. Just want to say that I think the methods that we use to address our concerns are absolutely the most important question as it relates to our values, that our values are reflected in the methods we choose to use to meet our goals. For example, we might presume that most people in our city do not want people to be unhoused in the city. We can imagine methods that accomplish this goal in ways that align with our values, as many people have already spoken about powerfully tonight, and ways that don't. Secondly, I wanted to respond to Councillor Zelenka, who discussed homelessness and mentioned that he felt that homelessness is, quote, not directly related to community safety, except maybe for the perception of it. I just want to complain about this assessment a bit, that the question of homelessness is not directly related to community safety. It's not an opinion that to be unhoused is to be less safe than to be housed. And so I'd urge Councillor Zelenka and anyone else who thought this was a reasonable way to frame this to consider what his statement that homelessness does not directly relate to community safety, but only to the perception of it. Consider what that means about who he considers to be part of the community and who he does not. Thank you.
Thank you, Rob. Our next speaker is the phone number ending in 327, and after will be Rachel Mary. Phone number ending in 327, can you unmute?
Yes, this is William Smith from Ward 1. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I'd like to talk about wireless safety. Many of us are wondering why city leaders haven't shown more concern about the wireless towers that will soon be able to cook us with microwaves very quickly, like the 10 Dutch pedestrians that I described last forum. Or they'll continue cooking us more slowly with effects like cancer and other proven harms documented in the 20 pages of independent peer-reviewed scientific research that was recently sent to each of you by Mark Hurwitz. His cover letter shows that the recent 94-page report from the Oregon Health Authority failed to produce any scientific studies proving densified wireless technologies to be safe, and instead relied on conditional statements saying that their results were provisional, presumably because of testing issues. Also, the OHA report failed to even mention the precautionary principle, but this shouldn't surprise anyone who has seen the book Industrial Strength Denial by the former Assistant Attorney General Barbara Fries, who describes the long history of this deceptive and harmful practice. Her interview by Joe Rogan is also highly recommended. Fortunately, as city leaders, you do have options. You can schedule a work session for public deliberation that is in fact fully allowed by the unanimous federal court decision 18-1129, or you can form a citizens committee, or you could pass a one-page declaration similar to that passed by the city of Easton, Connecticut, or all of the above? Finally, the health and safety of citizens and city workers, I believe, are depending on you to do what's right, even if it means moderating our desire for faster and
Thank you. Your time has concluded. Our next speaker is Rachel Mary, followed by Eli. Rachel Mary, can you please unmute?
Yes, now can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Thank you. I wanted to thank all the other members of our community who are part of the mutual aid group on the streets. I am actually a resident of Springfield, on the west side of Springfield. I may have actually accidentally directed some people here in regards to the Glenwood development that is soon to be potentially underway. And I want to let those people know that if they would like to make their voice heard, they need to contact the Springfield Economic Development Agency. However, I think that the way in which the Glenwood development relates to the homelessness issue in all of Lane County is pretty direct. There is a lot of resources and development that seem to be going towards developing more luxury housing, and the CIA going to the 65% was the proposal for the police department. Seems unreasonable when the community response is so overwhelmingly that we need to house our homeless. We need to provide them with mental health care services. We need to provide them with addiction services. I know that the police commissioner Skinner said that 33% of 911 calls are going unanswered. I feel as though if we simply made no barrier housing, that many of those 911 phone calls would not be necessary. I also want to echo what Nate said as far as I know people personally who have gone to work for Cahoots and who simply could not maintain that job because it did not pay them enough for what they were undergoing. They felt as though they didn't receive adequate training before being put out there on the streets. And that is what we need for this community. We need more well-trained, well-paid people responding to people who are out on the streets with needs that are nonviolent. And we need no barrier housing. And I guess that's all I have to add. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Rachel Mary, sorry. Our next speaker is Eli, followed by Zondi.
Thank you, Council. I live in Ward 1, and I'd like to echo many who commented this evening and ask the Council to put the public's money and land where their words are, and to stop putting money towards criminalization and harm. Land acknowledgements are performative witho't action, and the city is currently planning to privatize public land at 1059 Willamette in the riverfront and give millions of dollars in public subsidies, as well as give away public land to white wealthy men, developers, and investors for luxury housing. What does the public get in response? Who knows? The city has admitted that it entered into negotiations around the steam plant without first determining the public benefit of the proposal. In 2021, over a year into a global pandemic, unprecedented economic and housing crises, and protests against violence of policing and for racial justice, the Eugene's government's disconnect with the public and what it's actually doing is, I'm getting a little bit emotional because of it. It just is, it's extreme. And to see the number of sweeps and ramping up throughout the pandemic and increasing, and the level of criminalization increasing, and to going back to what we know is not the solution. If we want homeless people off of the streets, we must stop criminalizing them first. And the solution to homelessness is permanent housing. And I agree with raises for cahoots, if I didn't say that already, and echo many people. Thanks.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Zondi, followed by Candice King.
Can you hear me? Okay,
yes,
thank you.
We can hear you.
Thank you. First, I want to let all the counselors know that on Thursday, this Thursday from 5 to 7 p.m., Rico Perez of Calc and I will be meeting with someone from the city, I don't know who, as well as someone from Cornerstone Community Development. And the developers of 1059 Willamette have also been invited to this meeting, but as of yet, despite this invite standing for a week, we have not heard that they're willing to interface with us. And this is being hosted by Ibrahim Koulibaly, president of the NAACP. So if you're interested in a real conversation about what should happen with a $10 million public subsidy and what kind of housing can be supported with such a large subsidy, and the real potential for community land trust housing with real affordability covenants, I invite you all to watch. It'll be live streamed. And so if you go to Human Rights, Human Stories on Facebook, or just be in touch with me or Ibrahim Koulibaly, that's how you can access that. And that list of over a dozen organizations which I sent to you has now more than doubled. So it hadn't yet had Sunrise on it. It hadn't yet had Community Rights of Lane County, many, as I said, it's more than doubled. Over 25 organizations have signed on. And I think that I want you to consider what that really means. What process the city didn't engage in that all these organizations and these particular perspectives were left out of that planning, and consider that the same has happened at the riverfront. And so we can talk on next Wednesday, not 2 days, but a week from Wednesday, you will discuss the deal points for the steam plant. Those deal points will include at least $3 million in the financial gap. Okay, so think of from an Indigenous point of view, what it means that land is going to be given away to white men along with millions of dollars. What does that mean from an Indigenous point of view? Have you heard the phrase land back? It is about time that we have a center. If we're going to have a cultural center there, it ought to be.
Thank you. That concludes your time. Our next speaker is Candice King, followed by Mike McFarlane. Candice, can you unmute? We can't hear you. We can't. I will ask to unmute. All right, Candice, we will come back to you. And you will go after Mike McFarlane. So we will have Mike McFarlane and then Candice King.
Hello, everybody hear me? Hey, this is Mike McFarlane. I live in Ward 4. Thank you very much, Jennifer, for great leadership in my ward. I'm want to talk to you guys today about a good story. So this is, I don't have anything to complain about. I really wanted to say nice things. So take a deep breath, and this is good stuff. I was pretty vocal a few weeks ago regarding the riparian zone and camping. And I spoke out sort of heavily towards you, all of you, and said, hey, maybe we should get a few of you out to see what we're dealing with on the river with the Willamette River Keepers and the camping and all that. Councillor Groves, Councillor Keating stepped up and went for a wonderful ride down the river with us, looked at some places that the city deserves some great credit for taking care of. A few areas that we could maybe improve on, but just really wanted to thank both those counselors for jumping in the boat and taking a look at the river in a way that I hope each one of the counselors will have a chance to do. Mayor Vinnes has also come out with us, and thank you for that. So that leaves a few more. So I want to invite the rest of you to come down and take a look at the river. You've driven down every street. You've seen the city from all different angles. This goes right through your city. It's our #1 resource, and we're doing great things down there. But we invite all of you to come out and take a look at where we have to go. So thank you all. I can't imagine why anybody would want to be a city councilor. Bless you all for what you have to go through and hear. But we need you right now. And again, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you. Candice, you are up next. And it looks like you are unmuted if you want to.
Yes, thank you for your patience with that. I had to reset my app settings. So that said, I'm Candice King. I live in Ward 1. I serve on the Land Equity Coalition. I'm also the newest board member of Whitebird, and I work for Homes for Good Housing as the housing liaison for Lane County. All that said, I'd like to recite a poem to you all and then follow with some commentary. Imprison the man or flog the woman who steals the goose from off the commons, yet let the greater villain loose who takes the commons from under the goose. That is a 17th century limerick. It's a classic English poem related to the scourge of English enclosure. And that is what I witnessed the city of Eugene engaging in when we consider taking public dollars and, for instance, $20+ from my paycheck each month to funnel into programs that do not serve the purpose of actual community safety. For me, living in Ward 1, community safety means making sure that when I walk down my streets, I don't see people suffering and suffering the risk of all of the risks that come with homelessness, including harassment from police, as there were today, right on my street, right in front of our homes in Ward 1. Granted, there are safety issues in this community which deserve attention that would result in a physical altercation or confrontation, but the majority of the unsafe situations in this community involve not having affordable, appropriate, clean, and safe housing. The other concern that I have with the CSI being delivered essentially to the police of Eugene versus, say, an organization like Cahoots is, what kind of example is Eugene leading as a city? And that example concern extends to the fact that we would then take publicly owned lands and allocate them to already wealthy, already established development, corporations when we have people in this community who are housed who can't afford to sustain their housing. We have people in this community who are unhoused because they are disabled or handicapped or elderly and they cannot use the internet. That is the experience that I see every single day in, day out, as the facilitator of the Housing Navigator meetup of Lane County, as the housing liaison.
Thank you, Candice. That concludes your time. Our next speaker is Matthew, followed by Max.
Oh my gosh, hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, sorry, hi, Matthew Yu, resident of Ward 4. And I'm just, speaking again because, according to Eugene Police Department, of course, the bias, hate, discrimination that ADPI folk here feel is not an issue because they have not received any reports of it. Hearing their representative at the Human Rights Commission at the last human rights meeting, it's obvious that they also are just going through the motions and not putting a vested interest in understanding why these bias crimes are happening less for reporting and just saying that there's less of them. That means bias is going down, opposed to the underreporting problem that even the 2019 bias report put forth by the Human Rights Commission identified as an issue. I've got great ideas and suggestions I've circulated and shared at the General City Council email and some city councilors. I'd like to go through some of them just because of the inadequate response that EPD has shown with that statement saying nothing else, bias doesn't happen here. And we can't follow that line of thinking anymore as Eugene. And so since we have a department devoted to this, we need to direct all hate, bias, crime, and incident reports to the HRC, HRNI, unless it's an emergency. Create an easy report button that directs all the submittals to the HRC, HRNI, utilizing the over 240 languages Oregon Department of Justice hotline has. Have an option for the HRC, HRNI to report on behalf of the victim to EPD, because we all know how much pain and trauma can be around just interacting from marginalized and oppressed communities with that law enforcement. And so we need to recognize that we need a new model for resolving these things. And I feel that centralizing the reporting to the HRC will allow victims of these to have more leverage and more advocacy on that city department level and get more transparency from EPD on these things, and reach out to BIPOC businesses with that city department to increase awareness on campaigns, on intervention training, and empowering BIPOC workers and business owners. We'll also create a way, for allies and accomplices with routine trainings every month that are advertised and recruited to actively for intervention and bias training.
Thank you, Matthew. That concludes your time. Our next speaker is Max Rink, followed by Jackson. Jackson will be the final speaker in the public forum tonight for those that signed up by the 7:35 p.m. deadline.
Good evening. My name is Max Rink in Ward 3. I'm here to express and add my opposition to the proposal tendered to the city by DeChase Mixis Edlin and Company in advance of your May 19th work session. I believe this proposal amounts to a plan to transfer valuable public land, millions of dollars in tax breaks, and over $1 million in cash outright to a handful of already wealthy white men in exchange for no benefit to the ordinary residents of Eugene. Despite the claims of the City of Eugene's 1059 Willamette Housing Development Plan, I do not believe this project will have a meaningful impact on the availability of truly affordable housing in Eugene or other vital community resources that are currently lacking. In October 2020, Mayor Vinnis issued a proclamation on Indigenous People Days, which she stated was, quote, one step on the path to replacing harmful historic untruths with truth about displacement, genocide, and loss, resilience, and belonging. Indigenous People Day pushes against erasure, as well as, quote, We are inspired by local and regional Indigenous people who continue to fight against the systemic racism and injustice inflicted by the United States government. We are committed to improving our city's actions that pursue a higher quality of life and well-being for our Indigenous communities. And, quote, as mayor, I stand with city leadership for inclusivity and the recognition of past harm and offer our commitment to work towards change. I feel that if the city accepts the private for-profit proposals they received for 1059 Willamette and the 3-acre steam plant site, they will be turning their back on their commitment to work towards change in the systemic racism and injustices inflicted not just by the federal government of the US, but also the state of Eugene and the state of Oregon, and the city of Eugene. To sum up, I believe this proposal is the type of boilerplate that, if enacted, will contribute to the same type of de facto racialized gentrification I've already seen unfold firsthand in places such as Emeryville and San Francisco, California, where lofts for a wave of affluent tech workers push long-term, poor, low-income, even mid-income, disproportionately BIPOC community members out of whole neighborhoods. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Our final speaker of the evening is Jackson. All right, Jackson, it looks like there were 2 logins for you, so I will do the second one. Can you unmute Jackson?
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, you can hear me. Okay, thank you. Eric Jackson, I had concerns. I can't see the timer. I'm on the phone. My computer and internet are having problems tonight. I have concerns about Washington Jefferson Park with regards to a caregiver that is next to her, being a person that is in need of.
Jackson, you have cut out. It looks like you're still unmuted.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
No, you can't hear me? Okay. Being that she's a caregiver for the gentleman and they're being told that they can't be in the same place at the same time is absolutely absurd, because they're already congregating as a family to begin with in just the caregiving. For the Parks Department to insist without any skills whatsoever, you guys want a master's degree for outreach people. How about your Parks Department? Do they have master's degrees? I doubt it. And to make decisions like that seems to be inordinately odd. Beyond that, the 12 feet is a huge problem. And overall, I don't understand why you would possibly consider moving the Chambers property. Make it a drug-free property, get 40 people in and make it a drug-free property. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackson. That concludes the public forum for those who signed up prior to the 7:35 p.m. deadline.
Thank you very much, Julie, for walking us through that. And thank you to all of the people who took the time to testify today. Are there counselors that wish to make any comments on anything they've heard? Okay, Counselor Syrett and then Counselor Ye.
Thank you, Mayor. Yeah, thanks everyone who came to speak tonight. I'm just gonna respond to a couple of different things. One, I appreciate our first speaker who shared about the experience of the jet flyover. I heard that and I was in a parking lot on Coburg, and me and another person in the parking lot was looking around with great surprise. I didn't know that it was connected to the football game or a football game or whatever it was. I agree that it was disruptive and disturbing of the peace of our city. You know, not just the sound, but the impacts that that resident took the time to describe to us. So the city doesn't have any role in approving or not approving, as far as I know, a flyover like that. It's, if it was organized to celebrate football, that would have been done so by the University of Oregon, and that they would be the people to direct complaints to. So, you know, I don't even know if we were notified that that was going to happen. So I think we were caught as unawares as everybody else about that. I'm also not tuned into footballs. If it was advertised, I missed it. To the folks who, who shared the woman who shared the story about trying to find a place for a woman who'd been discharged from the hospital. This is a huge gap that we have in this community. Medical respite for folks who are unhoused or don't have, good housing options to go back to when they're discharged. And we need to work with our partners at the county and our local hospitals to do better. We are in the process of building more housing options for folks, but that's going to take time. And in the meantime, we do need to try to find ways to have placements for folks when they're getting out of the hospital. And that's not just a city responsibility. That is a community responsibility that includes our medical care providers and the county public health department. Regarding the complaints about Cahoots wages, the city of Eugene doesn't set the wages for Cahoots. Cahoots is operated by Whitebird, and Whitebird decides what their wages are. And my understanding is they do that by consensus of the folks who work there. I could be wrong, and I'm happy to be corrected if I am, but the city's not putting out a request for proposal that says we are only going to accept one where you have $18 an hour for your wages. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilor Ye.
Thank you. So yeah, I also wanted to thank Meg for what she said today. I think her takeaway was, think about things differently, which might have been a theme for a lot of the folks who came tonight. I also wanted to thank, and I don't know your first name, but T. Lipton and Nate, it sounds like you both work in our community with homeless folks, spending your time doing that. And I just wanted to appreciate that the difficult work that must be, and it must take a lot out of you. And I appreciate you coming tonight and sharing that. I also wanted to remind folks that we have a homelessness response update on Wednesday, May 19th at noon, which I realize is a terrible time for most of us to be watching, but it is available to watch afterwards if you're interested in getting some more information about that topic. That same day, there's also the steam plant discussion. It sounds like some people had interest in that as well. And I know Mike McFarland was making a rhetorical question about why would anyone want this job, but I'm going to answer it anyway. After being a parent, this job is the hardest, most frustrating, most hopeful privilege I will probably ever have. And it's difficult. It's never easy, but it is an amazing privilege, and that's why I do it. And I encourage that anyone out there who is thinking, wow, that's hard, I don't know if I can do that, you probably can. And you should think about public office. There's lots of different options out there, not just city council. And it would be great to see more folks getting involved.
Thank you for those comments. Councilor Keating.
Thank you, Mayor. I want to appreciate William Smith for giving me a book to read, Industrial Strength Denial. I will go to my favorite bookstore and hopefully yours too, Tsunami Books. And if I can't find it there, I'll go to the library. But I always appreciate getting suggestions for books to absorb. I was a little thrown off by the military jets flying over a game in which there was no one in the audience. I love it when it happens, and when I'm at the Crestwell 4th of July parade, but maybe a resolution, a no-fly zone resolution, is in order at a future council meeting. I want to recognize the great work that Whitebird does. Thank you, Candice King, for your testimony. And though we don't necessarily have a role in determining wages, years ago, I want to say it was 2013, 2014, I was among one of the first elected officials to advocate for an increase in the minimum wage to $15 an hour. And really looking at inflation, it probably should be around $30 or $40 an hour at this juncture. But that's the bottom basement that we should be operating at. And so any opportunity where I can lean in as a fellow resident of Eugene and advocate for increased wages, I'm going to take that opportunity. Mike McFarland, I thank you for your gratitude and your wisdom and guidance on our river tour. Councilor Groves is a river rat. He came prepared, and it was like an old hand. It was like getting on a bike, and I think the last time I had floated down the river was 1992. So it was a city kid and a counselor, a colleague, a friend who's an old hand at this. Councilor Groves had all the gear, and I don't want to speak for you, Randy, but I was in awe of the beauty and alarmed at times at the massive amount of cleanup that's needed, and the unfortunate situation that a for-profit company is engaging in, even bulldozing the riparian zone and the habitat. There's a humanitarian crisis, a housing crisis, an environmental crisis, and a for-profit corporation that needs to be held accountable, all coming to a head river left on the Willamette River. There are several days around the corner in which I call on council to join me in cleaning up the river. And maybe we can even have a competition with our friends across the river. May 22nd, Eugene, Maury Jacobs Park. May 29th, Eugene River Road. And June 5th, Eugene River House Outdoor Center. Thank you.
Thank you for that. Councilor Clark and then Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor. I actually got a lot of comments about the jet flyover as well. And as I think maybe one of the few people who's arranged for a jet flyover in my experience, at the previous 4th of July festival that I chaired, those are things you have to schedule with the armed services well over a year in advance, which is why I suspect the crowd not being there was not a consideration to that happening the other day, is because they wouldn't have known that when they arranged for it. But those jets either come out of Cape Falls or they come out of Portland to do a schedule and a series of flyovers. Personally, I loved it. I thought it was awesome. But that's a federal issue. And so if someone was upset about it, the person you want to talk to is our federal congressman, who's going to have more direct ability to have a say about that than anybody else. Thanks.
Thank you. Councilor Groves.
Thank you, Mayor. I was remiss in not in the opening information share thanking the group that took Councilor Keating and me down the river. It was a great experience, and I couldn't agree more with what Councilor Keating said. It was a combination of beauty, but also sadness to see how parts of our river are being treated. It truly is our greatest natural asset that I think we have in this community. And water quality is something that should be important to all of us. And I hope that we can find ways to continue the work to clean it up. I was very impressed with the work the city staff had done as far as cleaning up the river. I was very unimpressed with areas that are outside the city's control and privately held. by Union Pacific Railroad that were just absolutely a mess. We need to do better with our river and protecting it. So I hope this is something down the road that maybe we could even have a work session on. I know we have a lot of pressing issues right now, but this is something that should be important to all of us, and something that we need to leave in as great a shape as we can for future generations. And you know, as climate change continues, water is going to become ever a more important commodity that we have, and we need to protect what we have. Thank you.
Thank you all very much for your comments, and appreciate all the insights. I think councilors covered pretty much all of the issues that I would have covered. I just, you know, we continue to receive comments about 1059 Willamette. We do have a work session coming up on that. It's a complicated proposal, and so I would encourage people to, I was glad to hear from Zondi that she's going to has a gathering organized to meet with the Cornerstone Community Housing, because they are key partners in that undertaking. And a reminder that the riverfront development that this council has approved and has been in motion for a long time includes a piece of land dedicated for affordable housing. You know, we continue to try to find partnerships and make that possible. And also a reminder that we have to balance tax revenue with expenditures, and property tax is one way in which we support our city's budget in order to provide the services that you all need. And so we cannot promise services that we cannot pay for. And so there is a balancing act, and it's a challenge, particularly in a year like this. So we look forward to having an informed conversation about those investments and about those partnerships. And with that, I believe we are ready to go to consent calendar item 2. I think.
Do you just want me to make a motion, or is there somebody who need to talk? Okay, so I move to approve the items on consent calendar 2.
Second.
All in favor, please raise your hands. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Thank you very much. That concludes the business of the evening, and we are adjourned. Thank you all very much. Have a good night.